Welcome to the Craig and Greg Show, presented by Maximize Leadership. Now, here are Craig Owens and Greg Harris.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Craig and Greg Show. I'm Craig. This is Greg. We're kicking off a brand new year of bringing you some great content in your leadership development. You know, Greg, one of the things about leaders that I think often goes unsaid is the use of their authority or their power. You got to have a certain amount of power to get things done, or you can't lead anybody. And yet you can't go too far with it, or you run over everybody. And so I think really good leaders are probably finding that tension all the time of like, okay, where do I push? Where do I back off? How much do I, come in and put my foot down and say, this is what it is? How much do I say, okay, well, you guys can do it like that? There's going to be this tension that's there, but I think healthy leaders embrace that tension and learn how to balance it the right way.
I think for a lot of people, power can be confused with words like responsibility. Power could be, I'm immune from getting in trouble.
Yep.
I want to be the person who's in charge so I don't get in trouble.
Right.
So I think it's a little reverse. I think for me, the whole point of people seeing power is respecting it.
Yes.
I need to be careful because I need to be aware it can corrupt me.
Yes.
And we've got many stories.
Well, and that's that great quote from Lord Acton, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is absolutely going to corrupt you if you don't answer to anybody else. And that's certainly the unhealthy use of power. But by the same token, if you're just, a piece of milk toast and you're like, I don't know, what do you guys want to do? And competitors are running over your business, and other nonprofits are coming in and poaching some of your clientele. And you're like, well, we just, don't want to pick a fight with anybody.
Right.
That's not healthy either. But you got to have the power, but used in the right way, so you're not crushing.
I think there's a dangerous element of power.
Sure.
And it's attractive, At the same time, it should maybe put us in a spot of humility, like, I don't want to mess this up.
Sure.
And unfortunately for many, you don't have to go very far. You can look in politics or the news or sports or whatever. At some point, you're like, yep, power got to that person.
Yes. Yep.
It corrupted them. They're not the same person they were when I first met them and they were building their business or their journey as a leader was starting. When they've kind of accomplished, you're like,
I've arrived.
Yeah, so the relevancy, I think there's a gap in relevancy when someone really loves the power.
Yes. I think that's a great phrase.
Yeah.
I think when people say, I love the power, that's when I would be really cautious, because I would say, for what reason? Why do you love the power?
Right.
Well, I just love it because I can get things done. Do you love the power to be able to benefit other people? Because ultimately, that's the power, that's the authority we really want to have, is not to say, look at how great I am, but to say, how can I make other people, how can I help them thrive? How can I help them get to a successful place?
I think when a leader gets power, responsibility, titles, whatever that happens to be, there's a real catch for us leaders, and I've done it myself, unfortunately, is you're like, okay, so, I'll get to it when I get to it because I'm in charge.
Right.
But you've got 17 teammates waiting for you to help them, move the ball down the field for a client or a situation. I think there's also something about power that even though it corrupts, it can be used well. Like you can call in a favor for your team, not a favor for you, right?
Yep.
Or you can maybe negotiate and say, hey, that's not how our organization's going to run. And so if that's the case, we're going to bail on this contract. Yep. So you stood up for things, right?
Yep.
But when you rule with power, that's my catch.
Yep.
I've been around one or two folks where they ruled with power.
Yeah.
And they manufactured a lot of the power, unfortunately.
Of course.
But But they don't, my catch with them, the two guys in particular, they would never give you empowerment. And those are two different things.
Yes. Being in power and empowering. But you have to be in power in order to give the power away.
Right.
So, but I like the word when you said responsible. I like Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Person. He talks about the word responsible, if you think of it as response-able. And I think that's, I like the idea of power with a leader of now I'm in a position where I'm able to respond in a different way. And let's face it, in organizations, if you're looking at a flow chart, there are some things, and some levels of the flow chart you simply you're not able to respond in a certain way just because it's outside of your job description. And
right.
But that should be our goal, is like, if I get to this spot in the organization, I'm able to respond in a better way now. And I want to respond in a way that is trustworthy. I want to respond in a way that's benefiting my team. I want to respond in these healthy ways, as opposed to saying, I now get to do this for me, and I get the preferred parking spot, and I, right. Then you're like, okay, now the power has kind of gone to your head, and it's that is the corrupting power.
I wish my son was here to give me the best impersonation of King Julian in Madagascar. And sometimes when you get the power, you perceive you have it. And in that movie, I think it was Madagascar 1, where he really was, and listen to me, and you're not listening to me, and I think the whole power piece, that was my bad impersonation. Just, you can knock that off, but edit it. But I think that's the part where people in leadership, don't be a King Julian.
No.
And if you have to earn respect, earn it. Don't take it. Don't take the power, earn it.
Right.
And then realize they're entrusting you with some power, some authority, potentially over people. And that is a really big servant leadership assignment.
Yep.
Run with that word.
Well,
since you've written a book.
Well, I think, the ultimate example is Jesus, who he can't get any more powerful than he is.
Right.
And he said to his followers, he said, you guys understand in every culture, the person that is the honored guest sits at the head of the table. He says, but I'm among you as one who serves. And his statement was, he said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. Yeah. And it's only the person that has power that can choose to give it up in order to serve. And what an example that speaks to other people when you say, you could be doing this. I remember just blowing somebody's mind once when I had carried some cardboard boxes out and I was cutting them down to put them in our recycle bin. And a lady pulls up and she puts down her window and she asked me a question. Where do I sign in? Where do I go? And I said, if you just pull around over here. I said, but don't you have some stuff to carry in? Where you are right now is the best location. Let me help you carry some things in. So I stopped doing my cardboard thing. I helped her carry her things into her conference room, introduced her to the host. Then I went about my work. A little bit later, I'm sitting in my office and my office door's open and, my title was on the door. But as she walked by, she kind of looked in the office as she walked by, and then she does a dead stop, and leans back and looks in the office at me, and she couldn't speak. She's standing there in the door, and I got up and I came walking towards her, and she's like, and she's pointing at my name on the door. And I just said, yes. And she goes, but you were out there cutting up cardboard and you carried in my stuff. I said, yeah. And she's like, I
love it. That's awesome.
But when people choose to use their power to help others, it is a paradigm buster for a lot of people. They're expecting the person with power to sit back and just say, okay, everybody else bring me stuff, do things for me.
Right.
And now you're using your power to do stuff for us.
Yeah.
I
think being in leadership, I'd love maybe do this for another episode with you. I think leadership should be dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not dangerous in terms of scary,
no,
but dangerous in terms of, go for it. Dare.
Yeah.
And I believe the dangerous part about having power is the collision potentially with self-control.
Yes. Yep.
Right? So power is lashing out and sending edicts to the departments, and the memo on Friday at 4:30 telling everybody it was a bad week, and they go off in the sunset till Monday. Self-control really is something regarding this subject. To me, being in power means, like Jesus, he could have jumped off the cross.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah.
He had that, right? Sometimes we as leaders have some of that power where it's just best we don't use it.
Right. Well, I had found this quote that I shared with you from Nelson Mandela. Yeah. I like this one. He said, the problem I have is not how to use power. My biggest problem is how to not use power. So like, where do you draw that line? I said to my church board, I told them, I said, listen, I want us to make group decisions on this. I want us to come to consensus. There may be a time that I might have to say, despite what all you guys say, I might have to say, well, even though all of you want to do this, we're going to do this because, I'm accountable. But I said, I hope that in all the years I'm here, the number of times that we do that, we can count with fingers on one hand and have fingers left over. And I think so far, nearly 15 years into it, I still have all 5 fingers left for that. I've never had to say that. But you do have to have, there has to be somebody that ultimately they're on the line, they're accountable, and they have to maybe make a hard decision that goes against the group, but you're trying not to do that. You're trying not to flex on them.
But see, that's self-control.
Yeah.
That's a restraint that you could use it.
Right.
But I'm not going to use it. This is not the right time. It's not necessary.
Right.
I've been around a few people, I think you have too, where the power they perceive they were supposed to have, that's all they played for. You really couldn't say, hey, so, the HR department really gave a great report on that. Yeah. I mean, they weren't even involved. They just knew they loved the power. So let me get back to my agenda today. You're like, well, they just... or
they say, well, the HR gave a good report because, that was really my idea, and they just ran with it. And, they somehow just always turn it back to themselves. Yeah.
Having been in a sales organization for a while, and I enjoy the competition in sales, but sometimes you have to deliver bad news. And to me, that was my responsibility, or that was my power to tell the client, I got bad news, or we've got news that I need to work on yet. I never asked my teammates to make that call.
Right.
That wasn't theirs to do. That was mine to do. On the good stuff, I often would say, "Hey, it's a great solution. You worked it out with so and so. You talk to the client." So the power was actually empowered. Like, so you bring the good news, I'll do the heavy lifting if it's bad news. Right. And it wasn't that all the time, but they knew that if rubber needed to hit the road, Greg was going to pick up the phone and talk to the client. Right. And I think that's important for staff. Like, I'm not going to get blamed even though you have power.
Right.
Right.
Well, I love, one of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis, and in his books on the Narnia story, when you're first going to be introduced to Aslan the lion, who's this all powerful. Mr. Beaver is explaining to these children that you're going to meet Aslan, and that they're like, "Is he a man?" And they're like, "No." Mr. Beaver says he's a lion. Their first question is, "A lion? Is he safe?" And he says, "Of course he isn't safe, but he's good."
Ooh.
And isn't that what you want? I mean, you want your leader to be unsafe to all of the enemies that are going to come against you.
Excellent.
But you want them to be good to you. So you got to have the authority to be able to go, hold on a second. You're not crossing that line. Yeah. You're not going to impact my team that way. You got to go through me to get there.
Is he dangerous, but he's good? Is he safe? He's good. Yeah. I think one of the parts that I really relish, and I never took much in terms of the, karate training, jiu-jitsu, those kind of things. What I love about that is there's so much restraint
Right.
in those moves
Yep.
and that practice. So it's mental movement, it's memory movement of different positions, but they prefer not to use them.
Right.
Right. I mean, no one's going into a situation and I just want to karate everybody.
Right.
They're like, no, if I get pushed, I'm probably going to karate. I just don't.
If I
wanna
got to save my family,
I might karate, but I don't want to do a lot of it. You know, it's
Right.
almost like I can do it, but that's your example of Jesus was the same way. It's like, could I have the red carpet and the 12 guys in sandals do my feet?
Right. Right.
You know, could you break bread and give me my food?
Right.
You know, but he didn't. He was the opposite. And I think that's our call as leaders, is to do what's unpredictable, what's maybe untraditional. Countercultural, yeah. And I think people will find us in leadership trying to do that. They're like, he's not perfect, but I think I'm gonna sit around here because I think he's gonna get there. It's not gonna feel like I'm working with a bad leader. 'Cause you can have a bad leader, and a bad leader could be full of power and full of you know what. Because this is a PG show, so we got to be careful.
So you know what is okay. Yeah.
I think you know what is, but particularly if you need to spare a square. But you set that up on me, didn't you?
I know. Yeah. He said it, not
wait
me.
for the next year.
We're already in the next year.
I know.
How many years do you want to wait?
Well, I don't want to go that fast. That'd be bad. I think the parallel between handling power and servant leadership, I want to tee it up for you. You wrote a great book on servant leadership and are awesome at it. I didn't say perfect, but you are awesome at it. It's your secret power. It's your secret, other than Plunger Man. How do we parallel that, the power and the servant? Because it almost doesn't go.
Right. Well, it doesn't. But I think that, again, looking at the example of Jesus and then looking at the example of people who have really emulated him, that if you're giving power away or if you're doing things to serve other people, you end up becoming more powerful in the process. And people realize, that we want them around and we want them to have the power because they're using it in ways that benefits all of us. They're not trying to benefit themselves. They're not trying to gain something.
So selfishness is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I have these in Shepherd Leadership. I have those 2 chapters that go back to back about, I call it a leader's humble confidence or a leader's confident humility. If I'm confident that, okay, I'm in this position on purpose. I didn't accidentally stumble into this position, but I also realize I got feet of clay. I could blow it. I could make mistakes. So that, I think, earlier on I talked about the power, the kind of the tension between having the power but not using the power. I think it's the same tension between the confidence and the humility that keeps me in a place where I'm doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Yeah. It is hard to step back because we don't necessarily feel like, hey, it's power given to the whole group. It's power just given to me because of a title or years in service or whatever it is. I think the perspective that I'm gaining just from your sharing is sometimes it's okay to hold it knowing that you have the special magic, the power, but you'd almost like to see it just happen without having to say, doggone it, I'm making the decision and this is the way it's going to be. And I hope you're happy with it and you talk to me in 2 weeks. You really don't want that. You want them to buy in.
Right.
And be okay with it.
Yeah, where you say, I don't want to have to do this. I'd really like you to choose the right thing. Kind of, I think that
parenting.
As
Whatever.
parenting. Yeah, exactly. As our parents, we'd say that to our kids, listen, I don't want to have to force you to do this. I'd like you to choose to do the right thing.
Right.
But part of that having the power to give away there is to really say, I'm going to give you a chance to think about this for a second. This is one of my favorite things that I'll ask young people when I work with them. What did you decide not to do? I mean, I know what you did, but what thing did you decide not to do? Most of the time they're like, I didn't think about anything else. So that's kind of the difference right now between where you are and where I am, is I thought about my options. I thought about, if I do this, there's a consequence. Yeah. If I do this, there's a reward. You're not thinking through all of those things. And so part of my position that I'm in is to give you a chance. Think about it again. If you had it to do over, what would be another option? What would be another way of doing it? And that's how you're giving some of your power away to help them.
Isn't it interesting? Giving it away, potentially power-hungry people in leadership, ownership, management, supervising, whatever, they don't want to give it away because they don't think it comes back.
Right, exactly.
And 3 minutes ago, you had said, when you give it away and you empower them, you get more influence back.
Yes. Yep.
And I think if we could maybe finish up with that word instead of like power, and I know people love that, they want their parking spot and, the EVP on their business card, but really it's influence.
Yep. Interesting. I did a study once of the word influence. Its original definition was the power that people thought that the stars had to be able to affect their lives. Oh. But you think about now, like if we go fast forward a little bit farther, say before GPS and sonar and radar and all that kind of stuff, people that were charting a course over unknown, whether it was over the oceans or through the prairies, they looked up at the stars. And that's really what you're doing. Influence is really saying, I'm rising above all of the other stuff. I'm giving you an example to follow that is not, we used the word earlier, countercultural or different. It's not what you expected. But the more that I do this, the more people will look up at you and say, well, that's a good example to follow. But that only comes from you giving away the power.
Abraham Lincoln is one of my favorite guys. And if he was around, I wouldn't mind having a cup of coffee with him. But he's got that quote I really love. You want to see the character of a person, give him a little power.
Yes.
And let maybe just finish with that. That's really our test as leaders, isn't it?
Yep.
If we get a little power, we really have to watch who we are and how we act, because it can corrupt even the best people.
Yep. Yeah, and none of us are immune to it. I mean, all of us, we could give in to the pull of power. It can be so seductive, and so we can slip in little ways. And that's why one of the things that we like to do with our coaching is we give you a third-party perspective. We give you an outsider's perspective. And so if you go to maximizeleadership.com, click on the link for coaching and scroll down. You can read a little bit about coaching, but especially fill out the form in there. You know what's really good? Be proactive about it. Don't wait until you're struggling with something, but say, I'd love to be able to talk with a coach now to make sure that there's not something, back here in a blind spot that could trip me up. We're going to read what you write down, and then we're going to get back to you and say, here's how we can help you, or maybe we're going to recommend somebody else that you talk to, but we'll be there to make sure that you get the right coaching that you need to be successful. If you've got ideas that you'd like to share with us about upcoming episodes, you could leave a comment here. You could also go on Twitter at Maximize Podcast. You could shoot us a tweet on there, say, hey, I like this about the episode, or maybe you talk about this in an upcoming episode. We just want to be a resource for you to help you do the very best in your leadership roles. So that's the start of a brand new year. We've got a lot of content that we're already planning to bring for you this year. If you haven't already, too, would you subscribe on YouTube? Greg's got a great series of real shorts that come out. They're called Max Minutes. In 1 minute, you're going to get a nugget that you're going to be able to walk away with, and it's going to really transform your thinking. So if you subscribe and click that bell so you get notified, you'll catch all of that content as it comes out. We want to be here to help you throughout this whole year, and we believe by the time we come to this point, a year from now, you're going to be able to look back and say, wow, I've really grown. Let us help you on that journey. Stay tuned. Got lots more coming your way real soon.
Get in touch with Craig and Greg through Twitter at Maximize Podcast or at MaximizeLeadership.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of The Craig and Greg Show.